Good morning, class. I'm trying to get right after this. I promised you at the end of my lecture comments today in class that I would be recording some concluding remarks in a screencast. So that's what I aim to do here. You'll recall that today our big term, our big concept is liberalism. I aim as a result of my comments in class and now my concluding comments here in screencast to help us better understand that term and also to understand how its use has changed over the past 400 years. So in some ways, I mean, this topic is really relevant to our coming exploration of modern world civilization. But I'm also hoping these comments will be really relevant to you in your everyday lives as you hear a term like liberal or liberalism. I want you to understand what they mean and how you can better participate in conversations and better undertake new discoveries just simply by understanding this important term. So as I mentioned in class, these are the terms that I'm going to use to try to help develop our understanding of the term liberalism. And our objectives are going to look like this. Sorry, they're going to look like this. So we want to know what the term liberalism meant in its classical sense. What does it mean today? And how can we explain the change that has seemed to take place surrounding the term liberal as it was used originally and how it is used now. So with that, we'll start, and I'm going to skip through some of the early comments I made. I started talking about the anciens regime, or the old order, the way Europe looked in the centuries prior to the Enlightenment, the powerful institutions that held sway, and then really how the early Enlightenment thinkers and the leaders of the Enlightenment, this philosophical movement, how they started to sort of change people's assumptions and encouraged people, starting with a small elite, but growing toward a larger segment of society, tried to encourage those people to think outside traditional boxes and to imagine a greater capacity, a greater capability, a greater skill set among humans of the 16, 17, 18, 1900s. Okay, so classical liberalism, I tried to plant this subtle metaphor of the individual as an apple, and what fate befalls that apple sort of remains to be seen. But we talked about liberal in its really strict sense. Libertas, the Latin term, means freedom from, and in the context of Enlightenment era Europe, we know there were a lot of past traditions, past institutions that individuals might desire to have freedom from. So the church, the king, the nobility, the power of social hierarchy and the social organization that had proven very inflexible in the centuries prior. I also suggested my own definition for liberal, which means liberalism being a framework or a way of thinking that allows individuals to order their own affairs or order their own matters of their life in their own way for themselves. The idea that the individual knows better than anyone else what is in his or her best interest. So when you allow that individual to exercise and pursue his or her self-interest, the overall result is a net positive for society. And here are some assumptions. I'm going to skip through those since we've already talked about these. So some of the specific principles, this is kind of where I left off in class. These are things that probably look familiar because many of them have been included in our modern system of government here in the United States. We started talking about natural law and John Locke's contributions, the idea of the social contract, that the reason that, according to John Locke, the reason that individuals submit to the power of government is because government has effectively convinced people that it can protect and see to their natural rights to life, liberty, and property if we share some of our freedoms, if we consent to, say, follow the law and participate peaceably in society, the government says, hey, we can effectively see to your natural right to life, to liberty, and to property. And so why don't you submit to us, and everyone will get along just well. Of course, the other side of this is that if government fails in its basic duty to secure our natural rights to life, liberty, and property, then we, the individual who submitted to that contract, that social contract, should be free to break with that social contract. And that's sort of the, in a nutshell, the way in which the social contract of a liberal government model goes. Other things, uncensored press. The press need to be able to report freely without fear of retribution from the government. That's effectively what informs individuals within that society of what is actually going on. That is a healthy thing, even if that means that the powers that be, the leaders, have to from time to time read about things that they just as soon wished were not public knowledge. So be it. A free press is important to the health and sustainability of any society, according to the classical liberals. Also, freedom from established religion. Government and religion, nor religious authority, should be able to impose their beliefs upon individuals. Religion is one of those examples of something that is near and dear to the heart and soul of an individual, and it's absolutely important that that individual choose religion by his or her own freedom. There should be no external force guiding or dictating that decision. Economic freedom, what we buy, what we sell, limitations upon our trade should not exist, because if we're given economic freedom to trade and meet our needs and provide for other people's needs and wants, that's ultimately the most efficient way to organize the economy. So you hear about free markets. That's a classical liberal idea. And then limited government, democracy, limited government places certain constraints upon what role government is eligible to provide. You might think we live in a government that has tremendous power and dictates all aspects of our lives, but if you step back, you'll realize that on a daily basis, you make a surprising number of choices for yourself, from who you wish to date, who you wish to marry, how you spend your money, the route you take to get to campus each day for school, the color of pen or pencil that you use to complete your homework. There are countless ways in which individuals, at least in a liberal setting, a classical liberal setting, are given power over their everyday lives and decisions. Okay, so modern liberalism, let's get there. First off, there's this thing known as the political spectrum, and if you look at this slide, you'll notice we oftentimes refer to, when we're talking about politics in this, in our contemporary setting in the 21st century, we talk about the political right or the political left, and there's this political spectrum, this line that's drawn, and over here, see, over here you have the right. I have to do this backwards because I'm trying to show it to you. And then over here you have the left, okay? And one's perspective about things political is the product of a lot of different influences in their lives. And fortunately, we live in a civil society that allows us to think politically as we see fit. We can choose to vote for one candidate or the other. We can have strong feelings on one issue and different feelings on another issue altogether, so on and so forth. But again, we're back to the apples, and I want you to imagine that we are all apples. I've already introduced that metaphor, but we are on a cart, okay? And in some ways, your feelings about whether you are on the right side, the conservative side of the political spectrum, or the left side of the political spectrum, is going to have a lot to do with how you feel about the way in which your life and our society are organized. So if you look at this apple cart, I'm just going to ask you briefly, challenge you, make a decision, which apple, where on that cart would you want to be if you could be any apple on that cart? Just think about that a little bit. You can pause this if you need any longer to think about that. But typically students will tell me they generally like to be toward the top of the cart. There's something about maybe the view, not having other apples stacked on top of you. There's the possibility of, being a little bit more seen and observed. There's a little more attention perhaps for those apples on the top cart. You're desired, so on and so forth. In a real simple way, I just want to suggest that people on the political spectrum are like those apples. And if you like where you are on the apple cart, you're probably not going to want to see society changed much. Okay, like the way things were, the way things have been, have suited you pretty well. You're like one of these apples at the top of the cart. Why would you want things to be changed? What I'm going to suggest here is that you'd probably be thought of as a conservative. If you're an apple at the top of that cart, you'd probably be a conservative because you like the way things are going. They make sense, they serve you well, and you're not going to necessarily want to see things changed. Now, if, in contrast, you're an apple toward the bottom of this cart, and you have all those other apples on top of you, you can barely see. Whenever this cart goes over a small bump in the road, all the other apples go up in the air, and then they come back down and sort of press down upon you, and that feels a little bit painful and not desirable, then you're probably going to be progressive or liberal, meaning you're going to want to see things change. You're going to want to see that apple cart rearranged in a way that allows you better opportunities or a better situation within society. So we're all apples, but some of us as apples are satisfied with the way things are, and other apples among us are dissatisfied with the way things are. I'm going to do without this brainstorm here. But what this brings us around to is a fundamental thing that separates conservatives and liberals, or we might use the term progressive. And what that means is that a liberal today, in today's usage, they look at the world and they ask, how could things be different and better? How can we change through our laws or through our tax policies or through our social services, through our education? How can we change things so that it makes the overall arrangement of society more fair and better? Whereas for conservatives tend to see, when they look at society and how it's put together, they see it looking to be as it should be. It works. Life works well. It's good that people have to work hard in order to make money. And that may or may not be true. There might be some progressives or liberals who will say, well, that's the problem, is that some people don't work very hard and they make a lot of money in this society. But generally speaking, a conservative perspective would say, I like where I'm at on the apple cart. I feel like the apple cart is arranged in a fair manner, and I don't see much need for change. And so change becomes the absolute critical piece of the conservative-liberal divide. If life is working well for you, you want it to stay the same. So that's the change is what it's all about. Now, what happens, and I have to finish up here quickly, is that in the Industrial Revolution during the 1800s in the United States, there were a lot of things that happened that the typical Enlightenment thinkers like Thomas Jefferson and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and David Hume didn't anticipate it. And I would say that's the rise of big business. And what big business means is governmental power is sort of left in an interesting situation where it has to wrestle with a new kid on the block. And that is corporations that are larger than they had ever been or that the Founding Fathers could have ever thought of. And I'll conclude this tomorrow at the beginning of class with some with some concluding comments. Thank you.